Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. I have returned from my week down in Pittsburgh, speaking at some schools there. Excited to dive into some more. We're going to dive into the story of Erwin Rommel today. I've been really just absorbing all I can about the Second World War in Europe, especially the Normandy campaign. Going through the book Normandy 44, which is fantastic. It's probably the best book on that part of the war that I have had the pleasure of reading in a long time. So a lot about Erwin Rommel there, of course, because he was the man. He was the man in charge of the Normandy defenses. So let's go ahead and dive into this one.
Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, German commander. Rommel was born in Heidenheim, Germany on November 15, 1891. He joined the German army in 1910 and fought in the First World War as a second lieutenant in France, the Romanian campaign, and the Italian campaign. During the Battle of Caporetto in 1917, Rommel used his pioneering infiltration tactics, taking advantage of the terrain against the Italian forces. Rommel was always up close, in the thick of the action, and was wounded many times. At the end of the war, for his efforts, he had reached the rank of captain. During the interwar years.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Rommel and his First World War service. He receives the Pour le Mérite, which is right up there as far as the highest awards that you can receive for gallantry in action as a member of the German army during the First World War. And like a lot of Germans, he, I think, at least nominally subscribed to what they call the stab in the back theory, which is that Jews and Bolsheviks and others within Germany conspired to hurt their own country and to come out of the war even though they still felt like they could have won it, that kind of thing. Rommel was not to the level of an Adolf Hitler or others like that when it came to hatred of the Jews, but he definitely looked down on them, and I think at least to a degree felt the same way. He definitely spoke very highly of the Fuhrer at many different occasions.
Rommel served as an army instructor and wrote a military textbook called Infantry Tactics, which was published in 1937. In 1938, Rommel was assigned to the War Academy at Wiener Neustadt, Austria. When World War II began, Rommel, at the rank of Major General, was given command of Hitler's personal bodyguard.
Yeah, so there's a little more to that than that. During the pre-war years, Rommel actually gets assigned as the military liaison to the Hitler Youth in charge of training. So Hitler Youth actually fell under the auspices of the Nazi Party, as we call it. That's not what they called it, but and so it wasn't a part of the military. So he was assigned as a part of the military, and as the liaison, the representative of the German army to the Hitler Youth. He actually tried to get the Hitler Youth put under the German army, but he was never successful in doing that.
And he became known to the Fuhrer, who, recognizing his talents, appointed Rommel as chief for personal security. In February 1940, Rommel was appointed commander of the 7th Panzer Division during the Battle of France. During the battle, the division earned the nickname as the Ghost Division because it could penetrate the Allied lines without infantry support and with such great speed and surprise that it was difficult to track.
And there's a Sabaton song about that, which I don't think I've done that one yet. They opened with that song when I saw them in concert a couple months ago. We'll get to that one.
Rommel swiftly proved his talents in mechanized and armored warfare in February 1941, when he was made commander of the Africa Corps and sent to Libya, North Africa, to support the weakened Italian forces there. He would also be promoted to lieutenant general. During this time, Rommel would acquire the nickname the Desert Fox, idolized for his spontaneous and swift, aggressive attacks on the enemy. He was also frequently seen close to the action, leading from the front as he had done in the First World War, which inspired the troops under his command. Reich Minister of Propaganda Joseph Goebbels would also establish Rommel as a hero to the German public back home.
Which is something that's going to come back to bite them in a big way in 1944, because how do you undo yourself from the hero status when you come to find out that you think that your hero has been involved in a plot to kill the leader?
In the North African campaign, there would be problems of logistics because supplies had to be delivered over vast distances across the desert. But this didn't stop Rommel from taking swift action on the enemy. Fighting against the British forces, Rommel pushed them back across Cyrenaica and into Egypt. Rommel lay siege to the port city of Tobruk from April 1941, but could not capture it. Following his success in Operation Battle Axe, Rommel now made a new attempt to capture Tobruk and captured the city in June 1941, earning the promotion of Field Marshal from Hitler.
So Field Marshal to the American military would be, I think, the equivalent of a 5-star general, which the U.S. military didn't have at that point. 4-star was as high as they went. It was a rank that was first held by General Grant. So the first person to receive the 5-star rank was General Marshall, who was the chief of staff back in Washington. And any thought they might have given to making that rank Field Marshal in the United States, well, then you have Field Marshal Marshall, and it didn't really work. And so there's some thoughts that that was what deterred the U.S. from using that, and instead they went with the rank of General of the Army.
British commander of the 8th Army Desert Rats, Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery, would become Rommel's main adversary in the desert. He had taken over from Lieutenant General William Gott after his death in 1942. In November 1942, Rommel and the Africa Corps were defeated at the Second Battle of El Alamein by overwhelming British forces. Rommel was then recalled to Europe in March 1943, when the war in North Africa was lost.
So a lot of people say, well, Rommel was pulled out of there as things started turning, so that this hero of the German Reich didn't have the indignity of getting his butt kicked across Africa. So they got him out of there before you have Patton and Montgomery kind of ganging up on the Germans and whipping them and pushing them out of North Africa.
In 1944, Rommel, as commander of Army Group B, was assigned to reinforce the Atlantic Wall, the French Channel coast defenses, against an anticipated Allied invasion.
And so Rommel comes in, and he's looking at the Atlantic Wall, and he sees all kinds of major deficiencies. And to his credit, he did, with what he had to work with the resources that were available, and with the manpower that was available, he did a pretty good job of beefing up those forces. But you have to remember, he's got to cover, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of miles of coastline from Norway all the way down to France. And while he always kind of figured that the Allied invasion would come somewhere between Calais and Normandy, he also understood, in Rommel's mind, a lot of the Germans felt that to win against the anticipated invasion, you had to hold them at the beach and not let them get a toehold. Rommel had a different idea on that. His philosophy, and I think it was a solid one, was that you're not going to stop them from landing on the beach because we're just spread out too thin. You have like 60 miles of French coastline covered by one division. It's just not enough. And so what he wanted to do was hold some of their elite, like panzer units and things like that, our armor, just back. And so whenever they finally knew where the attack came, they would counterattack in that first day or two, push them back off the beach. And that was the idea. But the problem with that, and I'm sure they'll talk about this, was that Rommel, despite repeatedly pleading for this, was never given command of those reserve panzer units. They were under a different command, and he had to receive direct permission from Hitler in order to be able to move them. And Hitler notoriously would sleep in, and nobody wanted to wake him up to tell him the invasion had begun. And so by the time they're finally able to move those panzer divisions, it's too late.
On D-Day, Rommel's Army Group B defended itself strongly against the Normandy landings. Rommel's defensive preparations were well planned. However, he was refused by Hitler to allow his tanks to oppose the landings on the beaches.
So some of the stuff that Rommel does is, in addition to the strong defenses, you've got on these beaches, rather than having your guns facing directly at the beaches, which kind of limits the amount of field of fire you have, he puts some of the big guns on the ends of the beaches so they can fire down the long axis of the beach, which is a brilliant strategy. He has them put all these posts sticking out of the ground in any open fields where gliders might land so that they would tear up the gliders when they land. He floods any field that looks like it might be a good spot for airborne units to land, and that actually was successful as well. There were some members of the airborne who drowned when they landed in some of these fields. So all of this was really well done. Millions of mines were laid in any of these areas, and the mines did kill a lot of soldiers on D-Day and in the days that followed. So all really well done with what he had to work with.
Instead, Hitler ordered him to hold his armor back in reserve for a counterattack. Germany's defeat in the war was looking inevitable, and Rommel had become increasingly disillusioned with Hitler.
So Rommel had, early on, it's so hard to know for sure how Rommel felt about some of the stuff. There's conflicting evidence about how he felt, for example, about the Jews. It seems pretty clear that he was of the mindset that the Jews were inferior. I don't think he subscribed to the idea of the systematic extermination of the Jews. But, for example, there's a story of he had a daughter, I think an illegitimate daughter, and at one point the guy that she was dating, he wanted to see his proof of Aryan descent in order to date his daughter. So he did kind of have that mindset. He spoke of Hitler as being a great speaker, and he spoke very highly of Hitler early on, but it seems pretty clear that he got disillusioned as the war went worse.
Questioning his decisions, even directly. Rommel had not followed Nazi ideology throughout the war, and he wanted to negotiate a peace with the Allies. During this time, people suggested to him that he could take over as leader if Hitler was overthrown. Unaware to Rommel, these people were planning to assassinate Hitler. On July 17, 1944, Rommel was injured in his staff car by a British fighter plane and was sent to hospital. On July 20th, an assassination attempt known as the July Plot was made on...
So this is the one that's made famous in the movie Valkyrie with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise plays the character that you see there with the eye patch and missing one of his arms. And
Hitler's life during a meeting.
Places the bomb.
When the conspirators were tortured, Rommel's name was brought up. Hitler had to have Rommel executed, but he did not want the popular general put on trial for treason publicly. 2 officers visited Rommel's home in October while he was on sick leave and gave him the choice of defending himself to Hitler, commit suicide, or go on to trial for high treason, where he would be given a death sentence and his family would suffer retribution. Rommel opted for suicide by taking a cyanide capsule. The field marshal was then given a full state funeral where Nazi propaganda had stated that he had died as a result of the attack on his staff car.
So you can see how that kind of works out. You don't want to reveal to the world, and especially to the German people, that your great hero was part of a conspiracy, even though he probably wasn't. He may have been aware of something, but he certainly wasn't involved in it. There's no evidence that he was involved in the plot. He may have known about it, which was probably enough. And so this way you get out of the embarrassment of your hero being a part of this plot, but you still get the result you want, which is for him to be dead. So he's one of the few people, and I would love to hear from some of my German friends out there. How is Rommel viewed today in Germany by the German people? Because I know that, for the most part, you can't really idolize or make heroes out of World War II soldiers, but I feel like he's one of the ones that there's an exception to that rule.
Subscribe and click the notification bell for more history videos.
All right, so that's just a little quick kind of overview talking about Erwin Rommel. There's a lot more to his story than what I mentioned there, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Share what you know. I know some of you guys probably know a lot more about his story than I do, so I'd love to hear it. Use the comment section below. Thanks for watching.